Good evening. Welcome to the April 25th, 2022 meeting of the Grafton Planning Board. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this meeting of the Grafton Planning Board is being conducted with both in-person and remote participation by board members and members of the public. Remote participation by the public for the public comment agenda item, the public hearings, and any other matter for which the board allows public participation will be via the Zoom raise hand feature. If you raise your hand on Zoom, you will be enabled at an appropriate point to enter the meeting via voice or video to make a comment or ask a question. In all cases, whether in person or remote, please identify yourself by name and address for the record. And because some board members are participating remotely, every vote will be taken by roll call. And please note that this meeting is being recorded as well as being broadcast live on the Grafton Community Television Government Channel. We'll begin the meeting by taking a roll of the board members. Justin Wood.
Present.
Bob Hassinger.
I'm here.
Linda Hassinger.
Present.
Prabhu Venkatraman.
I'm here.
Dave Robbins is present, and Associate Member Maura McCormack.
Present.
Very good. Staff here with us is Christopher McGoldrick, the town planner.
Present.
And
Natalia's not with us tonight.
Natalia is not with us, so I can't call on any other staff right now. Alrighty, so we'll begin our agenda. The first agenda item, as always, is public input. If any member of the public is present either in the room or on Zoom and wishes to make a comment or ask a question or otherwise speak to an item that is not already on the board's agenda for tonight, now would be the time to raise your hand. And seeing no hands raised here in the room and no hands raised on Zoom, we'll proceed to our action item agenda. Our first action item is determination of minor modification for Cancun's at 75 Worcester Street. As I understand it, this is the outdoor seating request, and it appears to me that the configuration they're requesting is identical to the configuration that the board approved last year.
That's correct. Yep, so they did provide some updated plans as well as showing the concrete blocks that'll be used in order to enclose the perimeter of the area. I note the applicant is on the call as well if you'd like to add anything to the application.
Yeah, so my name's Carlos. How's everybody doing? So I guess the only thing with the application is that I know Mr. Berger made a comment today about the spacing, and I mean, we're not going to be, from what it sounds like, he wants a reduced area pretty much. He wants to make sure that there's enough parking spaces for the number of occupants allowed. So is it the number of occupants inside the building plus the additional outdoor seating, or?
Yeah, so the parking the parking has to, and this has been consistent with the board's approval of these, is that the indoor and the outdoor needs to be consistent with the provided parking. So that's in relation to the parking schedule, that the number of indoor and outdoor, regardless of how, that's your capacity, and that's set by parking. However many spaces. So if you're utilizing spaces for the outdoor seating, those can't be used towards your capacity.
Okay, because that's the other concern then. So we have a total of 63 parking spaces, and we're looking to use about 12 of those spaces, and then which would leave us 57 spaces, and then that leaves us with in compliance, it would allow for 171 people for occupancy.
And what's the total occupancy between indoors and outdoors together?
So right now the inside is 147, and we're really looking to add, 8 to 10 tables, which would be 32 to 40 people additionally. But we're still, we're a little short there on the spaces. So is that something I'd have to run by Mr. Berger to get the final okay on that?
Yeah, so the number of spaces, you'd have to reduce the outdoor seating arrangements to meet whatever the available parking is.
Okay, so yeah, so if I use half of the space that we currently, what we used last year was a big space, but this year, if we used half of the space, we'll have enough for, 6 tables, 6 to 8 tables, depending on if it's a party of 4 or a party of 2 outside.
Yeah.
But with that, we would be under compliance using only 6 of the parking spaces rather than 12.
Yep. Yeah, the board's, for the past 2 years, the board's approval of these outdoor arrangements have been predicated on the sum of outdoor and indoor seating being no greater than the maximum allowed by the available parking, considering the reduction in parking spaces used by the outdoor seating. But yeah, it's the rules. The rule, our approval would be the same this year as it has been in the past. This year, unlike in previous years, there's indoor seating has become more popular. So it's 2 years ago everything was outdoors, and so that it really wasn't an issue. But
Right.
now that more people are kind of going back to indoor seating, now we have to be careful that when you add up the indoor and outdoor seating and you add up the remaining available parking, they have to kind of match.
Okay, I understand. So instead of what we proposed here in the sheet here, the 60 by 40 space will be the half space. Then it'll be 30 by 40, and then we'll only be doing a tent setup between 20 and 40, just for an additional 6 tables, 6 to 8 tables.
Yeah, Bob, you have your hand up.
Yeah. I wonder if there's an alternative option, which is to somehow not use some of the indoor spaces.
Yeah, that was my other question. And then how, as far as talking with the building inspector, how many spaces over compliance would he allow too? If it's only, we're short 3 parking spaces to allow 10 tables rather than 8, but yeah, that's something we could also do, is reduce a section in the inside to allow for more outdoor.
Right, because what we're concerned about is the combination of indoor and outdoor seating together, and it's really I think you have some flexibility to sort of arrange the seating in whatever combination of indoor and outdoor you think would work best for you.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Hey, I had a question.
Yeah, Prabhu.
So this is more regarding the parking. Maybe Carlos can help out. So when you said the 171 parking spots, right? Did you say 171 parking, or how many parking spaces?
No. So we have 63 parking spaces, and the zoning law is you're allowed 1 space for every 3 people. So if we lose, if we have 63 spaces and we want to use 12, that's going to be 51. And then
The 63. Sorry, Carlos. The 63 is just within just around your.
yeah,
Canton's,
it's
right?
just the back side, the front side, and then the other side where the patio will be too.
Right.
That's
But is there a possibility for getting additional parking from Grafton Liquor or from right across the street? Would that count? Because when I come in, if there is no parking lot, I park at Grafton Liquors, or I park right across near King Jade's.
Yeah.
And then we walk up.
I mean, we people definitely park across the street, and then even the plaza over, that's the one that's right in between Pepperoni Express and Koopman's, that plaza right there, people park there too, and by the hot dog stand, and there doesn't seem to be a problem with that either.
yeah,
That gets us into trouble because all through the bylaw, all through the permit, there are parking requirements, and they, a lot of them, if not all, don't allow counting parking spaces of other people.
Right.
Bob, if I'm speaking for Carlos, I'm just thinking because the outdoor is still popular compared to 2 years ago. I know the last 2 years outdoor was the primary preference. But if Carlos or Cancun's can get some written documentation to show that they have agreement with Grafton Liquor to use 15 of their spots, does that work, or is that also not a viable option?
Grafton Liquor's parking isn't my favorite already,
Yeah,
but I don't see that, at least in the short term. I think we are, at some point, we're gonna get deeper into this question, if for no other reason than up around the common and the businesses up there. But we're not at that point. We have a rule. Yeah, I think we have a bylaw that says you have to have parking, a certain amount of parking. And that's what we're trying to work with.
I could be wrong with my understanding. Chris, you can tell me if you know for sure if I'm wrong, so to speak, but is that it needs to be dedicated parking during business hours of the business. So that, that's my understanding. That like if someone did say, okay, you can use this number of parking spots for our business, you have it in writing, but then those are dedicated for like Cancun's in this case, rather than someone parking in those spots and going into Grafton Liquors.
Yeah, so each agreement can be, it's going to be on its own, however that's set up. That'll be between two private parties. In this case, what we would, what I'd recommend if, given the select board's considerations of parking, that was one of the noted concerns when we met with them about the outdoor seating moving forward this year. What we'd want to make sure is that those spaces do not impede the count of that business. So, if there's units that or spaces that are in excess of the required parking for that business that they want to offer, that may be something that the board can consider. But that really should be included as well and formulated in a clear table of with the agreement provided.
Yeah, in this particular case, given Carlos's sort of a potential of interest in mixing the indoor and outdoor spaces in different ways, as long as sort of the rules overall are respected, would it make sense for this board to basically leave the the final configuration up to the judgment of the building inspector as to ensuring that the parking and the total capacity are in compliance?
Yeah, I mean, I think there can be some level of that delegation, but I think what we should look at is the base, right? The final configuration, whether it's six spaces or 12 spaces, can be
Right. So we don't necessarily need to approve specifically X number of outdoor seats, so much as approve outdoor seating provided with the condition that the sum total of indoor and outdoor seating does not exceed the capacity that's available for parking.
Yeah, so I think that that condition that we've used in the others
Yeah, that's
provides
essentially what we've done before.
provides the flexibility as well as the the ability to do that. What in terms of if we want to look at off-site parking, that could be something that's included as a condition that if we want to review that, then they'll submit the documentation to the board and have another.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that could work. I think that topic sort of gets into the concept of shared parking, which the zoning bylaw does address shared parking in specific contexts, like the village mixed use zoning. But we don't have a shared parking, as far as I can remember, we don't have a shared parking provision that would be applicable here. But that, in line with what Bob had mentioned earlier, that we have some other parking situations which the zoning bylaw doesn't fit real well, that I think we would, those also would tend to be, some form of shared parking situation. So, I mean, we're not going to solve that in the zoning bylaw tonight. But what we want to, I think what we want to try to do is get something that these folks can move forward with, and explore some additional parking agreements, and then if something like that, if they can negotiate something like that, then this board, that could come back to this board for consideration.
Dave, I think the building inspector wants to call in to add to the conversation. He just messaged me.
Yeah. I'm not surprised.
And that would be really good.
Email him.
Yes. I would not be opposed to that if he's able to call in.
Working on he says working on turning computers on.
Ah,
He must be watching us on cable.
Do we want to pause
yeah, so,
taking further action on Cancun's until Mr. Berger is able to reach
Yeah.
us and we can move on to the
yeah,
next item for now?
Well, there was one thought is that I think Cancun's hours overlap Grafton Liquor hours, so that would be, sharing there is going to be a little more challenging.
yeah, that
Some
would
other
be tricky.
combinations, even if we could do it. It seems to me that after we hear from Bob, maybe we can do what we've been talking about, and then I think you were saying if something more develops, then that can be requested as a separate step.
Yep. So yeah, let's, if there's nothing else on Cancun's, we can sort of suspend this discussion until Bob Berger can get connected. Anything else before we move on? And because we've got a very similar situation coming up next on the agenda. That would be Reunion Tap and Table, who also has a proposal for outdoor seating. I will note, you can come up, Sargon. I will note that it appears that this is basically the same thing as last year, except it's smaller.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're proposing one tent instead of two, and what, about a dozen tables, was it?
yeah. So my name's Sargon Hanna, 208 Brigham Hill Road. Here representing Reunion. So a couple changes from last year. Last year and the year before, we had two tents. In 2020, there was no indoor seating, so everything was outdoors. So the parking situation wasn't too confusing or crazy. Last year, we had the two tents as well, but we were also open on the inside, but we didn't have our back room seated, so that's where the parking configuration was still fine. But this year we have our back room as well. That we don't plan on seating until we're done with the outdoors. So our outdoor hours are probably going to end at 8 p.m. That's normally when we stop serving food. Friday, Saturday, we stop serving food at 9, but I believe the entertainment license only goes till 8. So I think we're going to shut things down outside at 8 o'clock. And that way, anybody who wants to sit outside, we'd move them inside to the back room to make up for that. So that's change number one, is one tent versus two tents. Change number two is last year we had flower pots as our barriers. This year we're going with, actually I have it here. I don't want to misrepresent what it is. So 18 inches high, 3 feet wide, 6 foot long jersey barriers from Sterling Concrete. And they weigh 3,800 pounds each. They will be, we're setting up 5 or 6 of them along the perimeter. So that will be for the public safety. That was a comment that I received today from Chief Crapo on the online permitting stuff. So we made sure we got these. These are going to be locked in. And then we might put the flower pots on top of these because they're only 18 inches high. Yep. So just to, make it look nice. So it's a good compromise. And went over with the parking situation with Mr. Berger today, submitted our license agreement that we have with Robertson Realty, which is where the Grafton Pizza Plaza. And this year we're losing 5 spaces, but we also don't have a tenant in one of the units. Jack's Guitar Garage is no longer there. So there's, between all the parking and what I had submitted, Bob today approved it and said he does, with the plan presented the way it was, he has no problem with that. I don't think I'm misrepresenting that. And other than that, there were 12 tables versus, I think last year we had 24. There are going to be 4 tops, so roughly about 48 people out there. We do plan on having live music, but I think it all depends on how we get that entertainment license. And for your sake here, it's basically 1 tent, 12 tables, Jersey barriers, and we have enough parking. So,
Okay. Mr. Berger has joined us on Zoom. So if Bob has something to chip in, as I suspect he does, on the Cancuns, and while you're at it, we can talk about reunion as well.
Okay, so first thing I'd like to do is talk about is Saigons. And Chris, if you can pull up the comment that I put on Viewpoint, that's really going to address my concerns with Cancuns. Because I've been working with Saigon and his architect for probably 4 days on giving me the information I need to make the zoning determination that his inside and outside seating will accommodate the parking that he has. And that's what I would be asking for Cancuns to provide me, that type of detailed information. So if Chris could share his screen, you can see my comment on today, and it would be the second one up under attachments, Chris. Unless you'd like me to try to pull it up from my house.
I'm grabbing it.
Chris is working on it.
And good evening, Planning Board.
Good evening.
Good evening, Building Inspector, Zoning Enforcement Officer, and wearer of a number of other hats.
Mm-hmm. And there's one there that has the chart. Why don't you find the one that has the chart? Go up. Go down a little bit, Chris. Go down one more. It's the next one. Huh, that didn't come all the way through. Go back up again,
Is it in the
all the
attach-
way.
That's as far as it goes. Let me check if it's in.
Which one are you on? Are you on 198 address?
Yep. Let me see if I have to refresh.
Let me see if I can find it real fast.
While they're looking it up, Sargon, are you planning, assuming the select board gives you the approval for it, to do the entertainment outside?
yes,
Okay.
yep.
It doesn't affect our approval or not, but
Yeah, I think I know they have new hours for how they want it set up. The select board had sent us a detailed letter on that, and yeah, so if we're allowed to do it, I think we're allowed. I think we already got the approval to do it, so it just whether or not we have a tent.
Yep.
We don't want people singing to nobody. So,
of course.
and then next year, if I understand, I mean, we've spoken about this, Chris, but next year, if we plan on doing this again, if there's no emergency order by the governor, then I think we're going to have to do a full modification of our site plan in order to keep this tent, if we want to keep coming back. Otherwise, there probably might not be a real avenue to do this again.
Yeah, I know we've been having some discussion about making perhaps some zoning bylaw changes to accommodate, long-term accommodate outdoor seating
Yeah,
to a greater extent than it currently is.
it's a
Chris,
real.
can I have the screen?
real quick, just watching consumer behavior, with COVID, there's still people who do not feel, they'll come into the restaurant, they'll wear their mask if they come in. A lot of people are saying we don't go out much, I say, I haven't seen you in like a couple of years. Where have you been? We don't go out. It's just, we'd rather play it safe. Or a lot of people are saying, we get a lot of people coming in, when are you doing the outdoors? I got a friend I want to bring, but he's COVID sensitive and wants to make sure that he could be safe and he feels more comfortable outdoors. So there's a need for this. It's a good thing that we're allowed to have this. I think just for our business and for the town and for the people too.
Of course.
Okay, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Berger.
This is the document that Sargon passed along through his architect. And it's really giving us a breakdown of what is on site and what does he need. But this was modified, so this isn't the one that I was working off of today. I don't know what happened in Viewpoint. That documentation got lost, but it's on my desk in paper. But this is the type of detail that I need to make a determination for this board to make sure that there's enough parking to accommodate the inside and the outside. So just with Sargon's alone, he started off with 153 seats, which needed 51 spaces. And then he's telling me his employees are parking off site, which brought up another issue. Well, where's that agreement between the two parties? I have the agreement now, but again, there's something wrong with Viewpoint. But I can tell you that I already looked at that document. And then and he's got several spaces in there. And this is off the original special permit that you issued years ago. Retail space 1, 2, and 3, and 3 employees needed this many spaces. And then his total spaces required was 70, which did not make his parking. So then he went back, or I went back with his architect today, and instead of 153 spaces for total inside and out, that reduced down to 138. So now the document that is missing does talk about 138 spaces. And he has 10 spaces offsite at Grafton Pizza with an agreement. So at the end of the day, for Cancun's, I'm going to be looking for, some sort of a document like this so I can verify that is what he has and what's required.
Okay, that's kind of what I was planning on doing, having like a table made of like, this is what our occupancy is now. If we can reduce it by this, and the inside we'll need pretty much the same thing, but like in a table format.
Right, but what I'm asking for, Mr. Chair, and if you went back to Viewpoint on his application, I wrote a note to the planning board saying at this time, with the information provided, I can't make the determination whether his indoor seating and his outdoor seating will accommodate his parking. So
Okay.
that's why, Mr. Chair, I jumped on this, because I really don't know how we're going to go backwards if you don't have a plan to reference.
Correct.
And that's why, Mr. Chair, I decided to get off my couch and call you guys.
Appreciate that. Bob Hassinger has his waving his hand.
Yeah, I have two things. First of all, what I wasn't sure about was whether the aisle between the tent and the parking along Worcester Street for Reunion was safe, but wide enough. In the past, it had felt really tight. I can't tell that from the drawing, and that's probably, well, actually, there should be a standard for that Bob knows. The rest of that, though, the rest of my thought is, it seems to me that if we say, like we have before, the seating has to fit the parking, then that lets Bob do whatever he needs to do to find out and to decide. And when a new tenant comes into the empty space, the adjustment is just with him, not coming back here. I don't think that we need to get that detailed in our decision.
Right.
I think our interest is that the parking match the occupancy, and let Bob do what he needs to do.
Yeah. I think that's pretty much the way we wrote them up last year. Maybe not quite as explicitly, but that was the idea behind
No,
it.
I don't think we explicitly said it, but I think if we have that in mind and write decisions that
Yeah.
fit that, unless Bob has a problem with it.
I think that it can be problematic because let's just say that you issue the permit and you say that it has to comply with section 4242 or whatever the actual article is. And then the applicant comes to me with his chart and I declare that it just doesn't work. He does not have enough parking. So I really think that just like I worked with Saigon and I gave a positive affirmative on Viewpoint, that's the way the workflow should go. Cancun's should submit their documentation to show me what their required parking should be based on their indoor seating, their outdoor seating, and also their maximum shift. And then I can approve it or deny it before it gets in front of your board.
Well, I'm saying we decide. I don't see why we need to decide anything more. All we can do beyond the permit we're being asked for is to ask you whether what they're proposing is okay or not. I think you can you could enable or disable them at any point.
And I did through the chair. I did today. If you were on Viewpoint, you can see that on Saigon's I approved it, and on Cancun's I held it, meaning I did not approve it because I didn't have the information I need to make that determination.
But I'm even saying down the road, if somebody wants to do offsite, count offsite that they're not counting now, that's a different story. And we probably have to get involved in it, although we have to check the rules in each case.
No, you wouldn't have to get involved in that because there just has to be a legal agreement between the two parties, and then it would have to be less than 300 feet away.
Yeah, okay. I know that we looked at it a couple of times when we were doing reunion, but no, I just think that it's what and I think Dave is more or less on the same page. We just approve it with conditions that they have to keep you happy.
Right. But whatever your board wants to do is fine. But for the workflow, it kind of makes sense that I'm here to check it before it gets to you, not the other way. You're the planning board, I'm not the planning board. But it only kind of makes sense that what happens if somebody comes in where it just doesn't work and they went through this whole exercise and they can't exercise that special permit because they won't be able to make that condition.
Actually, I think it may be a special permit. It might be a site plan.
Whatever. It's relief.
But then they have to come back.
But what happens if it doesn't work? Period.
Yeah, Chris has his hand up. I think he'd like to chime in here.
Yeah, so I think just to kind of simplify things, I think it's important to remember that this planning board is one piece in the puzzle that the businesses kind of have to, the number of hoops that they have to jump through for the operation of their business. There's the Board of Health has an approval step, building has the approval step, as well as police and fire as well having their approval steps. So those are all things that the businesses have to coordinate, and this is one piece. What I'd recommend is to have the regular condition, but perhaps an additional condition that prior to the issuance of or prior to being allowed to erect the tent, a chart with parking will be provided to the building inspector sufficient to verify or qualify the parking indoor and outdoor capacity and the finalized plan set. And I think that may, and that would then tie that condition and the provision of that paperwork to the approval of this tent and outdoor seating.
Yeah, I think the idea, at least in front of the board here, is that the board is wanting to say, we approve this outdoor arrangement provided that the applicant can satisfy the parking requirements. And that's up to ultimately, I think what Bob Hassinger is suggesting is that exactly how the parking requirement is satisfied is up to the judgment of the building inspector. And if, for whatever reason, if it turns out that there is no way for the applicant to satisfy the parking requirement, then the board effectively is not giving open-ended permission. The board is not proposing to presume that the parking can be satisfied. We're trying to say, I think, is if the applicant can satisfy the parking requirements through the combination of the parking spaces that are eliminated from use or converted to dining use, the sum total of the arrangement of seating inside and out, if the applicant can find a way to make that work, then we're saying, if you can find a way to make that work, we give you permission. But if you can't find a way to make that work, we're not guaranteeing that you're going to be able to succeed in getting the outdoor seating. Which may be one of the things, Bob Berger, you might be having at the back of your mind, is that sort of the implication that with the board's approval that basically says, yes, you can do outdoor seating. But we're saying, I think what we're trying to say is, yes, you can do outdoor seating if and only if you can satisfy the parking requirements.
Mr. Chair, may I?
Yes.
I do hear what you're saying, but let's just go back to Sargon's. In your decision that you're going to write, are you going to specify that the indoor seating has been reduced to 138 and the outdoor seating has a capacity of, I don't know what he put in there. Are you going to dive down to that level in your decision?
No,
because if you are, then what you just said won't work for Cancun's.
Right. No, I think what we're suggesting is that the exact numbers, indoor versus outdoor. I think we're not going to. I think we're suggesting that we don't try to include specific numbers. It's more of the generic requirement. The applicant has to come up with numbers that work, and whatever those numbers are, as far as we're concerned, if the applicant can come up with numbers that work, we're good. If the applicant can't come up with numbers that work, then too bad.
And I would like it to be as long as the applicant can maintain the numbers, they can do it.
Yeah.
If for example, another the unrented space gets rented someplace in July, that changes the numbers, and Bob should know about that, and he should act to sort out an adjustment. And I think that will work a whole lot better for everybody, except maybe Bob, than any of the rest of this.
Yeah,
I'd like us to move forward on that basis.
Yeah, I think Chris has put up on the screen the language from last year's approvals, and condition number 2 in particular is the item in question. At no time shall the provided seating capacity of the associated indoor and outdoor facilities exceed the original approved capacity. Parking spaces occupied by temporary outdoor seating facilities and/or infrastructure shall not be applicable for counting towards the parking requirements of section 4.2, which will remain in effect. So possibly this language could be tweaked a little bit to be a little bit clearer or a little bit more explicit. But that's the general idea.
Yeah,
That-
Mr. Chair, I don't mean to be a pain tonight, but I am. Condition 2 will not work for Saigon. Because
Right.
after we did the analysis for Saigon, his original occupancy for the restaurant was 153 patrons. Because of what he's taking those 5 spaces, and after doing all the math, now his capacity for indoor and outdoor got reduced down to 138.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and that's exactly what I had in mind when I said I thought this language could be tweaked a little bit, because it's not the original approved parking capacity that's the key here. It's the parking capacity after subtracting the spaces used by the outdoor seating that becomes key. So you're right, that language exactly as worded doesn't work. And I saw that as I was reading through that I would that's one of the ways, perhaps probably the main way in which I would tighten this up.
The parking spaces that remain, I think Chris can find a language that does that.
And I think you have, if you're not going to approve it under your preview, then it's going to have to put in after the inspector of building zoning enforcement officer reviews the submitted documentation.
Sure.
Because if I'm now the one that's going, and I am the zoning enforcement officer, if I'm now the one that is going to double check the math, then that should be in condition 2.
Yep, that's another way in which I would definitely improve it, is that whatever exact arrangement of indoor and outdoor seating and parking the applicant comes up with, I think Bob Berger, you would sort of be the guy in the best position to determine whether it is in compliance. And as Bob
I
Hassinger
did not
noted,
want to be.
yeah, that the configuration may change as the year goes on. Maybe in August they decide they want to rearrange things in a little bit. Move more seating outdoors or move more seating indoors. Again, any change in that arrangement, I think Bob Berger, you're in a position to review that for compliance.
Right. That and the current condition 2 does that dynamic enforcement.
At no time. Yep.
At no time shall the provided seating capacity exceed.
Yeah.
So if the exceed the original approved capacity.
Yeah, so that's where
My thing is at no time.
Yep. So your thing is at no time. That's important, and the original approved capacity is not the key here, but rather it's the capacity calculated based on the parking spaces that remain available for parking.
Yeah, and I would call it not original. I'd call it
Right.
modified.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the word original approved capacity is not appropriate here.
And I think Chris understands. Chris, do you understand what we want?
Very explicitly, I do.
Okay. Could I suggest that we do something about this and move on to what I thought was going to be a short agenda?
You good, Sargon?
I'm good.
All right. So I think it sounds like we've wrapped up both of these applications here with a sense of how best to write the condition so that it works for everybody involved and achieves the desired result.
Yes.
I
Do
move
we
that-
need to actually see it before we vote on approving these?
I'll defer to the board on that one. I feel confident that I can write something that's sufficient. Certainly would coordinate with Bob Berger to make sure that language is amenable, as well as the applicants.
I'd be happy to review any final language too.
That was the motion I was going to make for each of these. subject to the chair's review.
All right, consider the motion made.
Second.
Any discussion of the?
This is for both of these,
The
right?
motion is for both places. Any discussion of the motion? Hearing none. Justin?
I did see Sargon's.
Just a
Oh,
quick question. Decision on this. It's after the language, after you guys review the language, will that be at the next meeting or is this?
No, it'll be done.
Yeah.
As soon as Chris writes it and Dave says, okay.
Okay, so we don't need another meeting for this.
You don't need
right?
another week.
No, I would prefer not to
Okay,
have to do another meeting on this.
Just because we wanted to try to get the tent up, hopefully next week sometime, May 4th, May 3rd. So just wanted to make sure we would be there.
Carlos looks
And then
like,
I have a question. And then, so just for Cancun's, then I'll just have to get the chart so we can get the requirements straightened out with Mr. Berger, and then we'll be good.
You should call me, Carlos, you should call me tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah, I will. I'll do that chart. And
Yeah, Chris?
Call me before you do the chart. Call me
Okay.
before you do the chart.
So yeah, so just to clarify on the motion, the intent is to have, to vote to approve with the language to be adjusted to meet with the regular conditions, the language of condition 2 to be adjusted to meet, and in the case of Cancun's for an additional condition that the parking chart be provided prior to the tent going up.
you can put that in if you want, but
We can leave it out.
Bob needs whatever Bob needs to say, okay.
True.
Bob will tell them if he hasn't already what he needs.
I think maybe we could sort of incorporate that into the revised condition too,
Okay.
that the,
But that's, okay, that's part of my motion.
that the determination as to compliance will be made by the building inspector, and the building inspector will of course require all relevant information in order to make that determination.
Understood.
I think we can figure that out.
Okay, move the question.
Has my motion been seconded yet?
Yes, the motion's been seconded. I was about to call for a vote when there was a couple of additional questions. Is there any further
I'm ready
discussion
to
on
move the
motion?
question.
Hearing no further discussion, Justin,
Aye.
Bob,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Prabu,
Aye.
and Dave votes aye. Motion carried unanimously.
Thank you, guys.
We should be able to get that paperwork done tomorrow.
Perfect.
all right, thank you.
Good luck, guys. Have a good
Good
season.
night.
Thank you.
Alrighty.
Planning board, have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, now the time is somewhat past 7:30, so we did have a public hearing scheduled for 7:30. We will take up that public hearing and then return to our remaining action items. So
Ready?
this,
Pursuant to sections 1.5.7 and 1.3.3 of the Town of Grafton zoning bylaws, the planning board will hold a public hearing on Monday, April 25th at 2022, commencing at 7:30 p.m. in Conference Room A of the Grafton Memorial Municipal Center, 30 Providence Road, to consider an application for a special permit and site plan approval request for an accessory apartment located at 37 Magnolia Lane, shown as Grafton Assessor's Map 30, Lot 37. Said property is located in a low-density residential R40 zoning district. The applicant is Wingspan Properties, LLC, and the owner is Christopher Campos. A copy of the application plan is available for public inspection at the planning department during regular business hours or on the Town of Grafton website at www.grafton.mass.gov on the Planning Department Development Projects webpage.
very good. Okay, so this application is for an accessory apartment. And if the applicant is here, we could,
Where the applicant is, but
Yeah.
I'm also a part of that Magnolia Lane.
Yeah,
so
so,
Chris?
so this application is for, an accessory apartment. The proposal is to, finish out the basement of, the apartment building. There's no exterior modifications to the existing building, other than access and egress, which I don't believe. I'd have to double check if there was from the existing. But no exterior modifications to the building are proposed. And they provided a brief narrative as well as the layout plans for the downstairs basement.
Justin?
Sure. So, Chris, you might know this answer. I'm seeing the applicant being Wingspan Properties LLC, the owner being Christopher Campos, but our letter in the application package is saying Mike George wants to do this work. So I'm wondering how that all relates together as far as ownership and occupancy on this property.
Michael George is Wingspan Properties.
I believe so. I just saw Mike in the applicants raise his hand for the attendees.
Michael George is listed as Wingspan Properties. So he is the person who's doing the work.
Okay.
And Christopher Campos is listed as the resident, owner of the property.
What I was getting with that question was the idea that the board's typical practice has been that the occupant of the accessory apartment is related in some way to the primary occupant of the property.
Yes, I believe Michael George was in the attendees, and he's been promoted to a panelist as well.
Okay.
Good evening, guys.
Good evening.
I am representing on behalf of the Campos. I'm the owner of Wingspan Properties.
Do you own this property?
No, sir. No, sir. I'm on behalf of the Campos family. Christopher Campos is who I'm here for tonight. The application we submitted the application under through Wingspan, which is my business company.
Okay.
I think he has to understand that it's not said in here is what the intended use is of it. And we're
Yeah,
specific about that.
We have no information about the intended use. I think it was already said, we customarily, pretty much always require that an accessory apartment like this can only be occupied by basically family.
Correct. The parents are going to be moving into the new apartment.
Usually we have that given to us in writing, and usually the applicant is present and affirms that. But our decision, I almost always am the one that asks, "Are you aware?"
Okay.
And
I wasn't aware of that. I was following the when Natalia we've been working with through the application process.
Right.
In
any case, we just need to be sure that it's understood, and it doesn't create a problem with the intentions.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Yep. Just to sort of reiterate, there are two conditions that normally run with a special permit approval for an accessory apartment. One is what we've just been talking about, occupancy by family in whatever sense. And the other is that the approval runs with the owner. It does not run with the property. So if the Campos family moves out, then the special permit expires for the accessory apartment. So those are two conditions that, as Bob noted, that we want to make sure the applicant is aware of.
I wonder if that condition gets recorded.
Yes.
With the deeds. What would it turn up when someone went to buy it?
Yeah, they would see the permit, the special permit that that becomes associated with the property.
Correct. This
at the
decision,
registry.
the decision of the board would get recorded with the Worcester District Registry of Deeds.
Okay.
Any other questions from the board? I have a question from the audience here, as this is a public meeting. Feel free, take a seat or stand, whatever you prefer.
My name is Harry Clow, and I'm from 9 Magnolia Lane in North Grafton. I'm the chairperson. I have with me the treasurer. We have 3 trustees on the board of trustees. The Magnolia Farms Trust Association Trust is one of 2, I guess, homeowner associations that exist in the town. Another one's called Hassamasset.
Hassamasset Village, yes.
Right. And what happens is that we live under a certain set of bylaws and a certain set of covenants that we've lived by for years, since they've developed it back in 2004. And what happens is that in the bylaws that we have, the covenant, which is registered with the Registry of Deeds, along with the agreement, which is our bylaws that we live by. There are 24 covenant items, and the very first one that we have listed states the following. Let me see. It's called the use of the land, and it says no buildings or other structures or improvements of any kind shall be erected or placed on any lot, with the exception of one detached single-family dwelling designed as a residence for one family, together with the accessory buildings or structures normally appertenant to similar dwellings, such as a shed. But we're just wondering that how is this somehow in conflict with what we have? I do have a list of the treasurers with information in case you wanted to contact us in the future in reference to it. And I have the copies of the covenants as well as the bylaws for you if you want to have it for review.
Bob,
So,
Yeah. That's fine, but we don't have any power, don't think, to enforce your covenants. That's up to you. We don't have, I don't think that we could deny this based on your representation of your covenants with
so
your
you can
residents.
supersede us. Is that what you're saying?
No, I don't see
no,
how.
I think this is sort of an interesting situation that I don't know. Chris, you can, if you know something that, maybe before I say anything, Chris seems has some knowledge here.
Yeah, so my understanding in a case such as this is, the board could, may want to just not act on this, and the applicant may want to take some time to work with the homeowners association to resolve this matter. But in terms of the actual covenant and bylaws of the homeowners association in relation to an accessory apartment, I don't want to make any representations of what that language could or could not mean. That would be a matter between 2 private parties, essentially the homeowner and the homeowner association. And that's something that, they may want to resolve prior to having the board find a decision. Or the board could act and they would still need to resolve that, as it'd be a matter between them. But they're 2 separate
Yeah,
entities.
a special permit issued by this board does not in and of itself override any other legal agreements that may exist. And so, if, for example, the homeowners association prohibits this particular kind of use, this board's issuing a permit is not going to help the applicant here, because I think I don't happen to know whether the applicant was really. I assume that the homeowners association gets paid regular dues.
Every year, yes.
So the applicant is surely aware of the existence of the homeowners
That's right,
association.
because he asked on the transfer a letter was asked if the previous person had paid the dues, and that was submitted by the treasurer.
So that's kind of, it's really the issue, that what's at issue here is the agreement between the applicant and the homeowners association. And, just as a matter of convenience, maybe this board might want to, this board might want to take some action or might not, pending the resolution. Justin, you had something.
Yeah, just without making any, to me, determination on what your covenants say they can do or they can't do. The thing that you read stuck out to me is this: what they're proposing in what we have as an application package is all internal to the existing structure. So it's all improvements to their basement. It's not adding another structure on the property.
Right.
I'm not presuming that still is allowed or not with your rules, but I just wanted to.
I know, it's just that it just measures, it says, it gives you the idea that you have a single-family dwelling designed as a residence for one family. Now, you're mentioning that this could be an apartment for family, like an
Yes.
in-law apartment, and therefore the permit would only be for as long as those in-laws are there. If they sell the house, then it becomes an expired permit, and they can't just get someone else from the outside and rent it.
Right.
That's the impression I
Like-
get. So I guess you have not, we don't even know if this is for an in-law apartment, do we?
I believe.
This is for his mom and dad to live in the basement. This
Yeah.
isn't for any outside, and we're more than willing to provide you, whether it's in person or something in writing to that effect. The covenant that you read, sir, was, if it's not mistaken, is for a family. A family could include the mom and dad and the grandparents.
Well, that's because this is the first time I heard that this was for an in-law apartment. There was nowhere else it was mentioned, and that's the confusion on it. We want to make sure that it's done appropriately and not
But
being an
so
apartment for being rented out by someone else as a
Right,
form
and
of income.
that's clear from what we've stated that we normally include as a condition. That's very clear now. And I understand that you may not have been aware of that until now, and that's fine.
And that's, again, that's one part we did, and on any of the information that we got, that wasn't
Right.
mentioned.
Right.
Yeah.
So let me suggest this, that if the board were to approve this and the applicant were to, that the applicant's intention is clear that they have it occupied by family, then the question becomes between the applicant and the association whether that's properly included in the covenant.
Because we understand that that's, a way of life, that you bring in your in-laws or
Yeah.
parents.
Yeah, and by most common definitions of family, your in-laws would be considered family.
Well,
That's
Depends
not
on the
universally true for all in-laws. Let's note that.
That's true.
But Bob, did
Well-
you have something?
No, I think we pretty well covered the base, and unless there's somebody else that wants to contribute, I'd like us to move on.
Again, I would just recommend informally that the
I will be-
applicant,
I'll be talking to him and just clear the air, because
Yeah.
that was the one thing, it's like,
who is gonna
what's
live
the
there? Yeah,
intent?
understood.
No intent, but as long as, again, if the permit is just for the in-law, and we just keep the integrity of the entire neighborhood going.
Yeah, and
You're gonna get a chance to see the draft decision probably at our next meeting, and you'll see what provisions we put in there,
Sure.
Yeah.
and you can
just
tell us if Yeah,
I will be speaking to the occupant, of that particular unit, let him know that we understand now what's happening.
and just to be a little more thorough on the way the thing is, whereas if the same owner owns it, but the in-laws pass away or decide to move to assisted living or something else, another immediate family member with a similar need could move into there, as long as the same owner has it, but it would be still under the premise of family. We're not
Yeah.
gonna say only this in-law, in the
Right.
decision.
So
Yeah.
would the permit be extended, or would they have to renew the permit for the new group?
No,
No,
No?
I think as
long as
the
it's
permit is valid as long as that accessory apartment is occupied by some family,
Some families.
some family member. The family members can change over time,
Sure.
but the restriction is always gonna be, they've gotta be family.
Okay, that,
yeah, and the permit runs with the owner, not with the property. So when the owner sells,
It's gone.
this permit is gone.
So if a new owner wants to do the same use, it'd come back to us.
okay, sounds good. Well
Chris?
set.
You had something?
No, I think that was addressed.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you for your
Can I move to close the hearing?
Are there any other public comments or any other comments or questions from the board? Seeing none, I think I just heard Bob move that the public hearing be closed and staff be directed to draft a decision.
That's exactly.
I second that.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Justin,
Aye.
Bob,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Prabu,
Aye.
and Dave
It's
votes aye. Motion carried unanimously.
It's incredible how well you hear me, Dave.
I think, Chris,
Yep.
I think to prevent this, all the applications, we've had several come in front of us for accessory apartments that always say that it's for XYZ family member. I think this wasn't done this time. And I had the same question when I saw this. I said, okay,
Yeah. There
what's
was,
it for?
there was no narrative. Normally, there's a
Yeah.
narrative that at least starts down that path.
And I think that's something we have to be sure that applications, the people applying for these things need to be aware they have to give us that information.
Well, it'll go a lot easier. if
Yeah.
they do.
Duly noted. I think sometimes these things come across in informal discussions with the applicants, and in this case, it wasn't explicitly in the meeting materials. I'll make sure that it's noted in the future.
Right.
Sure. Thanks.
All
I don't
righty.
blame anyone. It's just the way it happened.
So let's go back to our action items. Our action item number C, action item C is the draft decision on the scenic road approval, which we discussed at the previous meeting. And we deferred completion of deliberation on the draft decision in the interest of getting a reading from town council as to what we might include in the draft in the decision to deal with the fact that this was an after the fact submittal. So Chris.
Yeah, so I have an update on this. First and foremost, I did take a drive by the property today to review if the stone wall has been replaced, and it is already back in place. I'll defer if that's sufficient or if anything else needs to be done, but it seems to be pretty well repaired in my estimation. In terms of the discussion with town council, we reviewed this specific decision language, and I don't think there's anything that we could include other than what is normally included in terms of this application, and adding additional kind of enforcement. What I didn't include, I know there was some questions about it. I didn't include in the exhibits because it's somewhat of a separate matter, but there is the potential to review. The MGLs do allow for assessment of fines. I do want to refresh that before I get too far down that rabbit hole. I refresh my memory on that, but I believe it's up to $300 per offense that the MGLs allow the communities to assess. So again, that wouldn't be able to be assessed in this case, but if we wanted to amend the scenic road bylaw in the future, that's something that we
Yes,
could
I think at least one version of what you're referring to is known as non-criminal disposition. And we have done that in a few of our bylaws, but not, we've not made that sort of a general thing in all bylaws. And it has in the past, non-criminal disposition has in the past been the subject of some controversy in town meeting.
Yeah, there might be in one case or another, there might be a different take on that. You know, the cases that people have been concerned about weren't like this, like failing to get a permit that you're required to get. It goes differently. I'm disappointed there's nothing we can do. I think there's one thing we can do. Under, I think it's section 6, chapter 6, whatever, in the general bylaws, there's provision for penalties and for violation of any general bylaw, which this is. So I would say, I think that what you do there is refer the matter to the select board for their attention. And the other thing we should do is to perhaps ourselves or perhaps there's a bylaw review committee coming, isn't there? Refer it to them.
Yes, it would seem that your planning board chair got appointed to that bylaw review committee.
Yeah. So it could be carried that way too.
Yes, I think I made a note of that from our last meeting on this topic. I made a note of that to remind myself that's something that the bylaw review committee might be interested in.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to move that we refer this case to the select board as per the provision in the general bylaw for their attention. They can do whatever, but in the future, anybody else who does this can expect at least that we'll do the same.
I heard a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded that the board refer this matter to the select board under the appropriate section of the general bylaws. Any discussion of the motion? Hearing none. Justin?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Linda?
Aye.
Prabhu?
Aye.
Dave votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. And now we have a draft decision in front of us.
See. The hearing's closed.
The hearing has been closed.
I move we approve the draft decision as drafted.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Chris?
Is it useful to have reference put that the in an additional finding that this was referred to the select board as well?
Yeah, as long as it also explains why it was approved or referred. It was referred because of the failure to obtain a permit before doing the work.
Yes, and that would be under Article 1, Section 6A of the general bylaws.
Well, it's 6A, B, and C, I
6A
think.
through 6.
The select board, I think in my copy, I think it still says the Board of Selectmen, but whatever. Down in somewhere, the last C, I think it
Yeah,
mentioned.
6A, 6B, and 6C.
Right. Okay. We don't have a motion open, do we?
We
Yeah,
do. I
We
think
do.
we should explicitly either include that finding or not in the motion. But
And let's include that in my motion if my seconder.
As a second, I agree.
All right. Any other discussion of the motion? Hearing none. Justin?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Linda?
Aye.
Prabhu?
Aye.
Dave votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. All righty. We have one more action item, one more draft decision, and that's on the modification of definitive plan approval for the Village at Institute Road. And Chris, I think the draft decision that was posted to the website is lacking unless it's changed, some edits that were suggested to clarify that the extension had already been approved. That was,
Yeah, so the draft decision that I had provided, it did include in a finding some language to that effect. We did receive edits from the applicant, which I took a look at those, and the majority of those edits are making that more explicit, and I have no issue with making that more clear in the decision.
Yeah, I see
noting
finding
it in a
6
couple.
is that.
Yep.
Are those in our draft?
Yes. Let me pull up.
did that get sent out to the whole board?
I don't know if it was sent out individually, but we did. It was. Did it get uploaded?
Yeah, but the only one I see in my email is the one that was sent by Mark to you, Chris, Natalie, and me.
My apologies. So let me pull that up really quick, and I will run through those edits.
Yes, I think the entire board might be interested in seeing that. I didn't look closely at it to realize that it wasn't shared with the whole board yet.
And it's not on the website?
No, it's not on the website yet. It never.
That, I have to object to that. I spent the afternoon getting ready for this meeting.
Can I make a comment, Mr. Chairman, while we wait to be pulled up?
Yes.
Good evening. This is Mark Mastriani from Pulte Homes. And I just wanted to respond to that. So we did provide some minor edits to the draft decision, but hopefully you will see that they're just clarifications or just a few very minor clarifications that I thought would help the decision read a little clearer. So I'm hoping that you'll see that, that's was the intent and there was no real material modification to anything you may have reviewed earlier. But thank you.
So I'll just run through these edits and give some of my own narrative on these more explicitly. So this first one, the confirmation of extension, I would ask that actually not be included. The extension, this is for an extension of the construction deadline, as well as the changes to the grading and phasing. I think including the narrative that was already approved is more sufficient. I think may be a little bit confusing.
I agree.
But then moving through, this just shows the red line version. So the modification of the definitive subdivision plan approval decision to approve several adjustments to the approved plans for a 46 lot conventional development residential subdivision, and that's replacing the language subdivision approval 2, extend the construction deadline as specified in the definitive plan approval decision for completion of the road and associated infrastructure. And so I think either one of those is fine. There's an additional comment added to the end of our standard kind of blurb here. The Grafton Planning Board approved a minor modification of definitive subdivision plan approval on March 28, 2022 to extend the construction deadline for completion of the road and associated infrastructure. So that's just an additional place that's noted. And then moving down, there's some added language in section 2. This modification deals specifically with a request to make several adjustments to the approved plans, as also further detailed therein. In additional to the 2 modifications, the planning board also approved a minor modification on March 28, 2022 to extend the construction deadline as specified. So again, that's kind of just noting again the March 28th vote of the board.
Yeah, I think the suggested language here also, the language prior to the applicant's edits seemed to be saying mainly it's an extension, and the applicant's, I think, suggested language makes it clearer that the extension is one of several modifications proposed here, so that's good.
And then here in condition one, again, I would remove this language of confirms, but it's typically this approval specifically relates to modification of condition, or specifically modifies condition A11 of the definitive plan approval decision dated January 22nd, 2018 as recorded. So I would actually would not be amenable to the language in condition one. Again, it's explicitly noted above. It's a separate vote of the board. And I believe, so the original application was for a 2-year extension. The way I wrote it was for 2024. So I'm not sure why we wanted to remove back to 2023, but
Because we usually extend for 1 year at a
Okay.
time.
What we voted on, the extension we voted on was for 1 year.
Okay.
And we did not come back and then further vote on adding another year to that extension, so 1 year is what the board approved.
Yep. So the application as it stands today, there was an additional extension that was from the governor's orders and the tolling of deadlines, and so the decision is effective until April 29, 2022. The request was for a 2-year extension, so that would bring us to 2024. The board has already, on the 28th, voted for a 1-year extension, which brings it to the 2023.
Right.
Right.
So the 2023 is the correct date in this condition
Okay.
one.
I just wanted to clarify that.
And that was it.
Yeah.
So you said that some of those things you agree with and some of those things you don't agree with, Chris.
Right, I think
Yes.
basically there was some language, proposed language here that used the word confirm or a variation of the word confirm. And Chris is suggesting that we not include those suggested changes.
Right. But he also wanted to change the heading.
Correct. Which is again the confirms.
So
rather
we,
than
you know,
to vote.
so what Chris is suggesting is that we don't include the confirm confirmation language, but that the other
Confirmation of the red there doesn't
delete
belong.
confirmation of their.
I'll move that we find favorably on this decision, including all exhibits and findings and conditions, with the modifications that Chris has indicated he agrees with, as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Justin,
Aye.
Bob,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Prabhu,
Aye.
Dave votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. Chris will get the final decision out as soon as practical, and the project can move forward.
Sorry, who was the second on that one?
I am.
Justin moved, Linda
Okay.
seconded, yeah.
Thank you.
Great.
All right.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, and
Good night, everybody.
we'll expect you back within less than a year for a further extension, assuming that you don't manage to get the whole project done within a year.
We will be back for that extension. And hopefully well under construction and everything going very well. So thank you very much.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Alrighty, moving on. Our first discussion item is the one that Rob is here for. 11 Wheeler Road basin flow damage. So you want to kick this off, Chris?
Yeah, so so this was brought to our attention by the Grafton Land Trust. Essentially on the plans, after further review, there is an outlet that extends from the drainage basin onto Grafton Land Trust land. It would directly affect the trail and the trail improvements that were, or has the potential to affect the trail and trail improvements that were also a feature of this application. Taking a look back from the plans as their initial application to where the board approved them, those were added the drainage outlet and pipe was added somewhere in the middle of the application, and it doesn't seem to have gotten much attention from either the peer review engineer or the board. But certainly, as we're looking at it, is something that may want to be addressed. I do believe that the applicant is aware of it. They've been to conservation, and my understanding is that application has been extended, and they're working on some additional edits to resolve that issue and ensure the plans can be in compliance. But at the request of the Grafton Land Trust, we place this on the agenda as a discussion item.
So did I understand correctly that this is on our approved plans that we did approve and endorse?
Correct.
Okay.
When I saw this, I thought I understood that the reason we have a problem is that they have discovered a pipe or some such that we weren't told about, and our reviewers were not told about. And since this area was so sensitive and so challenging, I think that right now the approval is void. We approved it based on our engineer saying it's okay, it works. He didn't know, they didn't tell us about this problem. I think we're gonna have to have a review of this, and they've got to hold up.
Yeah.
I'm really unhappy about it.
Did I understand you correctly, Chris, that this situation is currently now under review by conservation?
That's my understanding. Is there and the applicant's engineer is aware of it and is working on ways to resolve.
So at some point, this is going to result in a design change of some kind.
Well, yeah, depending upon what the applicant's engineer comes up with as a solution, it may or may not require further action. If it is something that can be done within the existing design and the existing approval, then the project could proceed. But certainly if there's anything that rises to the level of modification, it would come back to this.
So right. So that would necessarily come to the board's attention as a should there be any kind of a design change, that would come to the board's attention as a for consideration as a modification to the plan, and which would then require a determination by the board whether it's a minor or major modification.
Whatever. I don't think we're being asked to do anything tonight anyway.
No, I think that's just,
They want us to be okay with them trying to work it out, which
Yes.
sounds like a plan.
I mean, I'll let Rob speak to the intent of the land trust, but my understanding is that they wanted to have this brought to the attention of the board, so it's not something that continues to not be addressed. Given the applicant working with the Conservation Commission currently, I don't think there's action that's needed from the board tonight. But certainly, to have the discussion, I think is important, and to, bring it to the board's attention, I think is good.
yeah. Rob, did you want to comment on this?
Hi, Rob Aberg, 43 South Street, representing Grafton Land Trust. Thanks, guys. So I just wanted to give an update on last time we spoke. I was standing here, everybody was over here, but Joe Layden was there. Welcome, Chris. And so we did ask that question, myself and the board asked you, no, it will be, now I can't remember if it's retention or detention. I think I'm dyslexic on that. But the kind of basin with no pipe coming out of it, and the drawing showed, there was no pipe coming out of it at that time. And that's when we were worried about the muddy trail and the cars that went in the river recently and all that, you recall. Yes. So we were worried about that. But then we came up with a land swap, which happened in January, to move the basin back farther away from the trail. What happened though is it slid back over, which is probably okay as long as it was the kind without the pipe in it. But since then, at one of the last drawing changes, which was supposed to be minor things, Norm Hill at Land Planning noticed that, hey, what's that 18-inch pipe there? So an 18-inch pipe is concentrating 7 acres of flow, and then that would go, its outlet is about 4 feet or so from the trail. An 18-inch pipe.
That sounds less than ideal, shall we?
So that's why I thought you guys would want to know that. And there's no easement for that flow. Was my main the central worry was that there's a concentration of flow, and yeah, it'll wreck our trail, and we talked about it, and we got money to work on it, and Land Planning's working on it. But more importantly, that flow would cause erosion all the way to the river, and so we wanted to leave open the possibility that if the developer was here, the owner, engineering firm, wanted to negotiate an easement, dig a trench, make a head wall right at the riverbank with a pipe in it, or some of these other options, we're willing to work with that, and that would then go under the trail and be great, and everybody be happy again. So I just wanted to make sure everybody's aware that we're willing to work with people. And then Chris and I found out on March 18th, what my email to him was March 10th, March 18th, lots 1 through 6 got sold. So that makes it interesting because this basin is on a parcel called Common Land, which is not part of lots 1 through 6 that got sold. So I don't know what that does to the permit, that you can have lots 1 through 6 sold, but the infrastructure for the development that includes the basin wasn't sold. So the deed has some funny wording, and maybe an attorney should look at that as well. So I just want to make sure that you guys were aware of at least the stuff that I'd seen, and you may want to confirm it or not. So it got a lot more complicated than it was before, unfortunately. Thanks.
Bob?
I thought we had asked about piping the water.
We did.
To the river, and there was some reason that it couldn't be done.
It wasn't necessary. At the time, Joe assured us it's the kind of basin that doesn't have a pipe. So okay, no pipe.
I thought there was, conservation always has these rules about you can't do things. And I thought maybe it was, you can't do that and put that into the river.
I'll leave that for the engineering, but my recollection was that there wasn't going to be a pipe, so that made it okay. Then if there was a pipe that went to the river, you have to design it a certain way. But since that wasn't on the table, we said, and the whole group, we just said okay and moved on, was my recollection. It's on video somewhere.
I will know.
So what do you need from us? I think it was to not object to you trying to work it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you guys were concerned about the trail. I wanted to make sure that you knew that we're working hard on getting that trail, but it just got harder.
Well, the project is dead if at this point until that gets fixed, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, the trail's still muddy, even without the project.
Yes. Conservation Commission on their April 19th meeting, which was the last one, did not have this on their agenda for this property. And their next meeting is May 3rd, and there's no agenda posted yet. I'm just calling that out, that if there's been discussions, it's been not with the whole board at this point.
Okay.
So I do believe it has gone before the Conservation Commission. I can look at the dates. But it may not have opened in a hearing. But I
looked back on their agenda.
My understanding is that they are coming before the Conservation Commission, and that was requested to be continued to a later date, and I don't recall off the top of my head when that was.
Sort of interesting if that pipe wasn't on the original plans, and sounds like
it's on the
from your
plan.
description at least, it's a new pipe. Is it
Well,
new?
So the meeting we discussed it, it wasn't on the plan the night we discussed it. It was added in a subsequent.
Okay, so
It was added, but it wasn't pointed out that it was added.
That could be. In any case, however this ends up getting resolved, certainly I think we'd like to see it resolved. And if the resolution involves any kind of a design change, then that will have to come to our attention.
Correct.
For now, it's probably sufficient for us to be aware of this situation and to kind of keep an eye on it at least, as right now it appears to be a potential problem. And, yeah, one way or another, I think we would, I think if it doesn't get resolved, that's a problem for us. If it doesn't get resolved, that's a matter of some concern for this board.
Well, I wonder if there is anyone that we should advise about this situation, like say the zoning enforcement officer or maybe the building inspector.
I can certainly have that conversation as well.
Yeah, wouldn't hurt.
Yeah, and also see if somebody like town council can look into the deed of sale, the deed, to make sure that the basin and the lots, who owns it now? Because the way I read the deed, it said lots 1 through 6, which does not include the parcel and common land. So that might involve different owners than.
Yeah, so I
maybe
mean,
last time.
to the extent that all of this drainage work is on the common land, then the owners of the common land continue to be responsible for it.
Right.
And it may be that the lots themselves are being sold for the purpose of building houses on them. But all the infrastructure, the roadway, the drainage, all that infrastructure is the responsibility of the.
I think the roadway might have been mentioned in the deed too. Anyway, have town council look at it would be my recommendation.
Yeah.
So, Chris, to summarize this, what's in my head here, and tell me if I'm off base on any of this. The plans as we endorse them would allow them to construct that drainage pipe in the basin. The problem being that there's nothing in our decision or on any records that we know about that allows them to actually have a discharge of water outside that property. Is that
Correct.
Yeah.
That's my understanding, is that the approved plans were put on there, and typically there's a prohibition from discharging water from a project onto other property. So that's not included in the decision, but that's normal. But my understanding is that the pipe and the drain are on the existing endorsed plans and included, and it's an issue that needs to get resolved. Part of what, until the engineers have worked to resolve it,
Yes.
I don't want to make assumptions of where we go as a planning board, and
Yeah.
so I think it's sufficient to be aware of it, to watch it, and to see where conservation goes with it, and then we can address what's needed on our end. I agree with the the note of concern from the members in terms of moving the project along with the plans as endorsed. I don't think that was explicitly in the intent of the board, and I think the applicant's aware of that.
Dave, I'm interested. I think that was a flexible development, and hence the common land. And as I recall the bylaw, I think there are 4 different ways that the common land can be dealt with. And I'm interested in which of them has been selected and is it effect? In other words, who's responsible for that common land? And who is going to be responsible for it?
I remember that being part of our discussion when we actually had this hearing. I don't remember what the outcome was, but
Right.
I think it was part of our discussion.
It was what?
So I think it was part of our discussion. We actually brought it up, and I think.
Yeah, I remember hearing about it. Yeah, in that same meeting.
Ought to find out.
Yeah, and a note that the original concept was that the basin was not in the common land, and now it is shown on the registered survey plan. That I think it's 96084. That the basin is on the parcel named common land now, as I last reviewed it.
Well, I'd like to find out if that's going to make a difference to how it gets dealt with going forward. Is there anything else we can do for this?
Sounds like we've done all we can at the moment. We'll keep this on our radar, and deal with any changes as they come up. It sounds like there, if nothing else, there may be, it may be appropriate to sort of review the current state of the project in light of what the board actually approved. You know, have they done the work so far in full compliance with what we approved? Sounds like there may be some question about that.
And maybe if we get more answers, Chris, from the stuff that haven't brought up that you're gonna start talking about and looking into, if it doesn't need a board discussion, we can at least have it mentioned in staff report in future meetings.
Absolutely.
All right,
Just wanted to bring it up to you guys since we
thank
talked
you.
about
Thank you,
it.
Rob.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If there's nothing else on that, we'll move on to our next discussion item, mill redevelopment bylaw. Any update on that, Chris?
So just a slight update. I did provide some yellow lined. We did have some updated language for the warrant article language that was responsive to comments from the board from the last meeting. I believe it was regarding the fire department. I think that this warrant language as provided is pretty good to go. We've had a couple cracks at it. Obviously, we won't post anytime soon. We're looking at the fall, but I just wanted to bring it up and have one last look at it, and then we'll have a placeholder for the fall and bring this back up closer to that time.
Yeah, I was uncertain when I found that, you know, we had these definitions of use types, I guess, and how they interact with what we now have across the whole town. If those are definitions that apply everywhere, that's a different story than, you know, if they go in whatever it is, section 2, then that's a different thing. And I want to be sure we don't get ourselves into some trouble there.
Yeah,
You know,
that actually is one of the things that I have meant, and in my notes I have a reminder to me to review that. I haven't done that yet, but that's that did kind of catch my eye as well.
There can be such a thing as too many layers and interactions
Yeah.
and spider web structure in a bylaw.
So slightly more generally, I wanted to review this in with a particular eye towards how best it fits into our current zoning bylaw. And I haven't actually tried to do that yet, but I do have that in mind.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have time to do that.
I think as of today, we have time to worry about it. There will come a time when we run out of time, so we want to make sure we get this.
Yeah, and it'll come a lot sooner than we'd like to.
It always does.
Think. Right around the time when we start kicking the can down the way.
So, anything else on that for tonight?
So I mean, if we're gonna kind of take some cracks at kind of reviewing this in deeper detail, is this something that we'd like to keep on the agenda for the foreseeable future and just allow updates? And if there's nothing to bring up, we'll just pass over it, or what's the inclination of the board?
Sure.
Yeah, keep it on our radar, I guess. Well, I mean, we've got other planned zoning bylaw updates that we're planning for fall too.
Right.
So maybe just
Combine
a regular
them together.
catch-all discussion item on zoning updates. This
Well,
being one of several.
I think I might like to have the specific subjects listed. It's a way that I like to do agendas. That reminds us and it reminds the world about what's going on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe just to be ultra specific and pedantic, a bullet point for fall zoning updates, and then under it, each one of the ones we're targeting.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
It costs us essentially nothing to print stuff on an agenda,
Yeah.
except maybe costs us time at a meeting if we don't have anything new on that agenda item. But better to have the reminder than to let it fall by the wayside or fall into a crack or wherever it might end up falling.
Roughly 25 seconds a meeting.
Okay. On master plan update.
So that, I'll be sending the letter to, of the board's recommendation to go with CMRPC, to the select board, tomorrow morning. Apologize in the delay in getting that put together and sent to them. I did discuss it with Evan today, and I believe we'll be on the May 3rd agenda, for the select board, to discuss that, and the contract that was, provided by CMRPC, so.
Yeah, and I think it wouldn't be a bad idea for us to be prepared to spend some time at that select board meeting talking about what we're proposing to do and what our timeline is, because the select board has been discussing some development related to some topics that relate very closely to the master plan update. And yeah, I for one would be delighted to be able to discuss some of that stuff with them. I haven't mentioned it lately, but a while back I did the review of all the recommendations made by the 2001 master plan. I've completed that, actually. I was thinking we should have a place on the website to start posting master plan related documents. For what it's worth, as I've said before, I found 195 unique recommendations in that old master plan. And of those, approximately 50% have been acted on, either completed or partly completed or are ongoing, things you really never could say are complete. But about half of those recommendations we actually did act on. So I'd be not going to read through the whole document tonight or anything, but I kind of let that drop for a while, and I realized, yeah, I actually got that done. We need to find a place to start putting master plan documents. And the other thing that I've been doing to date that I think feeds into the master plan is I've been looking at housing development based on the assessor's data as to when houses were built. But I've developed some I think interesting information and charts and graphs that show how housing development has evolved in Grafton over time. And I think that feeds into the question that I want the master plan to answer is, are we happy with the way Grafton has been developing housing, or do we want to continue the same direction, or do we want to sort of redirect the housing in a way that maybe generally we would like more? So I have some sort of preliminary. It's still a work in progress, but the results are kind of interesting. I don't know if anybody wants to take a quick look at that tonight. I'm always prepared to talk about that, but it's getting toward 9 o'clock, and I don't know that we need to spend any time on it now. But that's got to be a big part of what we do with the master plan, is look at where we've been and figure out where we want to go. Anything else on the master plan? Yeah, I hope we can get on the agenda for the select board. And we can begin some discussions about what we're going to do. The other thing I wanted to ask the board tonight is do we have any sense, any of you on the board have any sense of how we would like to sort of see this project organized and how and how we should proceed with it? I know the planning board is the lead agency on that, but and we did in the in the request for proposals, we did talk about, and I think the CMRPC proposal also talked about, engaging stakeholders, engaging the community. But where do we start in kicking this off and making it happen?
If it'd be useful, I could kind of go over. We had a rough framework for the master plan, splitting it into 3 pieces. And since we're kind of discussing it, it might be useful just to briefly go over that. So we did split it into 3 parts. where the first kind of year, it'll go over 3 years of a process. The first year is primarily going to be data collection. That was slated for this year, so I don't believe that that'll be too time. Well, it will be time intensive, but it's funded, and I think we'll be able to get through that piece and still get back on track because it's all going to interrelate anyways. But it's going to start with the data collection piece. After that, what we'll be going to town meeting for is looking to allocate the additional funding to move into the public process piece. So that'll begin, after July, after we, if we've secured the funding, we can begin that immediately. So that will start with a number of public charrettes and public discussion sections, probably piecing it out into specific topics, as well as some more general discussion. But that will be we're going to use the data to frame that discussion. And then the final kind of year, the final step, after having the public discussion, having the data collected, is to bring that all together and to finalize the document and put all the pieces together that we've dug up through that 2 years.
So are we going to organize a committee of some kind to pilot this? Now, I wasn't involved in the 20 years ago process. Bob was.
Oh, yes, I chaired it. I think we might, at some point before too long, we might be having a chance to have a conversation with CMRPC leader and sort that out a bit more as to how we want to go. Get their advice, probably her advice, and work through it because they're proposing and following a plan that they're fairly familiar with.
Yeah, at least for me as well. Once we actually have a date we we're going to be able to start working on this, it would make sense to notify several boards and committees in the town. Like I'm thinking, Affordable Housing Trust, the Historic Commission, CPC, Select Board, of course, Finance Committee, just to name a few. I'm sure there's more we might want to include. Conservation Commission, Open Space.
Yeah, part of the process was identifying early in the process, identifying stakeholders, and that's basically what you're talking about.
Yes, my thought is just to send out a letter to anyone that might be even a potential stakeholder, and if they technology committee as an example may not be that strongly of a stakeholder, but I know you and Bob are both on it, but the idea is if they didn't know that this was a thing, it would still be useful for them to be aware of it. And
I think maybe Bob kind of hinted at that. Once CMR begins to be engaged with us, I think one of our first meetings with them will be to start nailing down who's going to be involved in what elements or what aspects of the project. Again, it's our sort of our responsibility as a board to take the lead, but I think it would be good to rely on CMRPC for their experience in organizing these things in recent years. Probably we'll want to basically as soon as we get them on board, we'll want to get together with CMRPC, maybe CMRPC and maybe us as a board or some subset of us as a board, and begin organizing this and begin mapping out how we're going to organize the project and who all will be involved in what phases of the project.
I think we should have the whole board talking with the CMRPC project leaders.
That'd be the best start.
Sort that, address it at that point. Maybe you end up with a planning board subcommittee. I don't know, being part of it. Who knows? We'll see.
All right, enough on that for the moment. I'm gonna be harping on this until we get it done, because we've been putting it off too long, as all of us who've been on the board for some years have been painfully aware that this effort is overdue. Alrighty. I didn't see any bills,
No bills, no minutes.
didn't see any minutes. We may have a staff report, since we have staff here.
I have a brief staff report. We did have our, I think since we last saw, we did have a holiday and some days off that I took. But we have had some breathing room. We've been kind of tying up loose ends on some of the projects that we've been getting. Doesn't really rise to the level of staff report. One thing that I did want to note in terms of the MBTA communities, I did submit our community information survey for compliance with 2022. We also have a follow-up meeting that'll be put on the select board's May 3rd agenda. CMRPC put together an additional briefing, and so we'll be, I think it's useful because it has some updates from our February meeting with the select board. There's been additional kind of resources and outreach that the state has done, so it'll be useful to take another look at.
But the February meeting with the select board counted as the briefing for the select board?
Correct, yeah.
It's community information forum? Because
Yeah.
that had to have been done by May 2nd.
Correct. Well, we did have, the planning department, on February 8th, we did meet with the select board. We reviewed the draft guidelines, and correct, that was primarily in terms of, collecting the public comment for March 31st, but it's certainly sufficient for the.
As long as that counted for what they asked for.
Yep. So,
That's it for staff report?
it is.
Anything in the correspondence that caught anybody's eye?
The Snow Road development we just recently approved got a denial of a temporary occupancy. Like, I know I mentioned to you, I think Bob in the same email, Bob Berger, that it appeared like there was people actually occupying that, what was it, a month ago now, roughly? Maybe a month and a half?
It may have been, yep.
But Bob Berger's letter does not seem to indicate that people were staying there, at least not as what his letter was talking about, but.
Yeah, we did receive some questions from the public regarding occupancy there and some of the remaining work for the closeout of that site plan, not special permit approval for that project. My understanding after reviewing with building is that they have not yet been issued an occupancy permit. So there's still some closeout items that they need to work with. I did reach out to the developer, and they're aware of that, and they're working to finalize some of those steps. I also reached out to the residents at it who had voiced that concern and clarified that with them as well. So.
Okay, wonderful.
If there's nothing else on correspondence, are there any reports from planning board representatives on town committees and CMRPC? Justin.
All right, so the last several while, the CPC had its meetings about approvals. We had to go on the warrant for town meeting. There's 2 new projects going on town meeting warrant this spring. One is $135,000 for South Grafton Elementary playground accessibility improvements and structures. So that will be at a town meeting. There's also $15,000 for the Unitarian Universalist Society of Grafton and Upton, which is the white building next to 1 Grafton Common. Is the church there? The $15,000 will support engineering work to improve the accessibility to its 2nd floor and I think basement maybe, but is to do a lift in there. And then there's also going to be a grant writing workshop for CPC this Thursday. So if anyone is looking to try to acquire CPA funds from the town for some project, that workshop will be a good opportunity to come in and get some guidance.
I do kind of wonder about the money going to the church. I know someone commented today, yes, on social media about it. But it's, yeah.
Yeah.
But also, that committee's been having a lot of visibility lately about
Yes.
political issues.
I was keeping that out of my update. But
Well,
as far as as far as the church goes, just to say that the committee's overall feeling, I'm hoping I'm summarizing this correctly, is that this is a valid use of CPA funds because this work will support much more than just the congregation of the church. So it's not religious in nature. So meaning that there are Boy Scout meetings and other non-religious meetings that take place in that building that they open to the public for it. So those are fairly regular. That's my understanding, but it'll be addressed more at town meeting, I'm sure.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
No, but the meetings with the selectmen and all of that, concerning.
Okay, a completely different thing. If you haven't done so, people ought to just take a drive past Pine Street to see the work that's been going on that development at the train station.
Yes.
It's quite a good bit. It's a lot's been torn down. So they're really, I haven't seen so much heavy equipment in Grafton for years. So that's going ahead, great guns. And that's really great to see because so many people see projects that we've approved that kind of sit there for ages. One gas station that hasn't had anything happen to it for a couple of years, a few years, many years. But that area there is really roaring along, great guns. Also, the guy developing the store at what was Anzio's,
Yes.
that's going along quite nicely too. He's really working to try and pick up the facade there, and that's got stuff going on. So things are actually going underway, and he's a lovely man, by the way. So, things are moving along in town. We do have projects that we've approved, and there actually is some movement. It's hopeful to see.
Amazing.
Grafton Common just ran an update about the Pine Street location as well within the last, I think, week.
And the work is proceeding on the Riding subdivision off Adams Road. Not the work isn't very visible from Adams Road, but they've got riprap on the entrance there, and they're doing something back there.
And George Hill Road is turning into a trail.
Well, no, it's that the trail is beginning to degrade into a path. I think the town really owes me new suspension and new tires. What did I just think of, though?
There is actually some evidence on the surface of George Hill Road that the engineering study is beginning to get underway.
Yeah, there's been paint on the road a couple of times.
Paint on the roads. That's more progress than we've seen in years.
Yeah, well, I assume that's starting the engineering, measuring what's out there, that sort of thing. But what was it? I just saw. Oh, there were questions out in social media about the gas station on Worcester Street, and I checked. And I think I heard that the owners had been looking into reopening it. And I think basically that's going to, I suppose, it's not a, its use ended quite a while ago. So it depends on what permitting it might require, whether they could do that without a new permit, and the permit that we issued to them to do the whole redoing of it has expired, definitely has expired. So that's no longer in play. But there were two different people reported seeing some sort of activity there in recent days.
Yes,
Some sort of regular maintenance.
I can report having seen some activity. I couldn't tell what it was, but there was some activity going on there for, it may have only been site investigation work or who knows what. Just driving by, since I was driving, I couldn't really take a close look at it. But, yes. Any other reports from planning board representatives and town committees and CMRPC? If not,
Move to adjourn.
Second.
You didn't cover
second,
item
that we be
7.
adjourned. Justin,
Aye.
Bob,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Prabhu,
Aye.
Dave votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. We are adjourned.